Beyond the Hood, stories and strategies to fuel dealer growth.
Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Hood with Tractor Zoom. My guest today is Jim Rothermich. You can find him at Twitter at The Land Talker. Jim is a seasoned land appraiser here in the state of Iowa and has ag experience starting in Missouri, on the East Coast, in the Carolinas, and then now settled into Iowa, where he's been tracking land prices for almost 2 decades. And we talked today about the quality of data, the importance of transparent and recent data in both land and equipment, and how the two have trended together for the past 15 to 20 years. We've got some interesting topics that talk about the history, the current state, and what we might be able to expect for land and machinery values going forward. So I hope you take this opportunity to join me as we look beyond the hood with Jim Rothermich. Welcome everyone, and welcome Jim Rothermich to Beyond the Hood with Tractor Zoom.
Oh, thank you for having me, Andy. Looking forward to it.
Good. And this is really, it's a passion of mine because, like we talked about before, I bought land in the last couple of years. And so I was sitting there sweating, heart racing, and now I owe a boatload of money on this. But I think it's also important to talk about this in the context of, land prices with machinery prices, just because the two together just take up such a pretty big portion of a farmer's pocketbook. Right. And they trend a little bit, maybe not perfectly together, but I think they do trend together because they're both capital expenditures.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into this, but I want to let you have a chance to introduce yourself and tell the audience, who you are, because I know you started in real estate in 2008. Yep. But and we had talked before, you're from Missouri originally. Right. So do you want to fill in the gaps for us a little bit? What happened between Missouri and 2008?
Yeah. I am from a little town in Missouri, central Missouri, called Avasse, and it's spelled Auxvasse. And that's right in central Missouri. And it's just north of Fulton, Missouri. And Fulton, Missouri is where Sir Winston Churchill gave his Iron Curtain speech.
And part of the wall is still there, because Westminster School, right?
Yeah, Westminster College is there.
I've been there.
So just north of that, it's prairie land there. And my dad was a crop and livestock farmer, and he's deceased, but my brother runs a farm. And so I graduated college in 1988, and the farm depression was still going strong at that time. And they had just come out with the CRP program, and just thousands of acres in our area went into the CRP program. And I'm talking whole farms. I mean, people just put their whole farms in the CRP
And was that a Reagan initiative when that happened?
Yeah,
we also have CRP ground that was just there when I was growing up, but that's probably a result of the same thing.
That's when it started in that time frame, like 86 through, I think 1986 is when it started, but it was just starting out. And people just latched onto that and just put whole farms in there. And then what was left that people were farming, there was a thing called the PIC program, and that stood for payment in kind.
Okay, yeah.
And so I remember going out and measuring the worst part of the field and then planting the rest. And then what we measured off was set aside or whatever. I don't quite remember how those programs work, but there was only a handful of acres being farmed. And then everybody that had hogs and cattle went out of business too. So It was just not a good time to be graduating from the University of Missouri. I had an ag econ degree, and nobody was hiring. Everybody was laying off for ag graduates. So there was people there from the East Coast, the hog companies from the East Coast, wanting to hire people from the Midwest to come out to North Carolina and manage hog farms for them because they were doing explosive growth.
And this is in around 88,
Yeah,
right?
88, 89 in that time frame.
Okay, so we're still, if the farm crisis really started to happen, in 81?
Yeah, and that, yep.
So we're talking about 7 years afterwards. So when we compare today to then, big difference between what we're going through now. Not even on the same page.
Not even close. Not even close. And so I hired on with the company's now owned by Smithfield Foods, but at the time it was called Carroll's Foods. It was a family-run operation, but they moved me out to North Carolina, and they had brand new farms, 1,400 sow, farrow to finish, all on the roof, all on concrete, all inside. I never seen anything like it before in my life. So I worked for them for a while, and in 1992, I moved to a town called Princeton, Missouri, and that's the headquarters of Premium Standard Farms.
Oh, yep.
And so at that time in 92, Morgan Stanley dumped like $600 million into that area, and they put in 50,000 sows and all the finish spaces and a packing plant there too. So I worked for them for a while, and so labor was always an issue at that time. I know labor is an issue now, but on those big corporate hog farms, it was a problem back then. And so I just kind of got burned out on it, and I thought the grain business was where I wanted to be. So I worked for a company called DeBruce Grain, which is, I think it's called Viterra now. And I worked at loading trains and barges at Nebraska City, and then moved to Creston, Iowa, and loaded trains there. And so labor was a problem there again too. And working on the railroad schedule, I found out I didn't really care for that either. So I was talking to one of my banker friends at Princeton, Missouri, and he was telling me, you ought to become an appraiser. You ought to appraise real estate. You got the right degree for it, and you've got a lot of experience. You ought to try that. And I thought the top of my head was going to blow off. I said, that's it. That's what I need to do. So I started getting into that. And being an appraiser is not easy to do. You got to have 3,000 hours of supervised experience and 300 hours of specialized appraisal education.
So 3,000 hours?
Yeah, 3,000 hours.
Are we talking years here?
Yeah.
Many years.
Yeah, about 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
And you got to have a supervisor, so you basically don't make any money in that time frame. But it's what I wanted to do, and so I got into it and started appraising there in around 2008. And I was doing it down in Missouri, and I was working at that time for Farmers National Company. And in 2012, or no, it was 2010. They had a appraiser that was retiring here in Des Moines. So when he retired, I took his position. So that's what brought me to Des Moines. That's how I got into Des Moines. I live in West Des Moines right now. And my current job is with Iowa Appraisal. And we are a commercial and ag appraisal firm. And we are owned by BCC Advisors. And they are litigation support, business valuations, and let's see, there's one other thing, mergers and acquisitions.
Oh, okay.
So that we have an office downtown, but I work from home in West Des Moines, and I do all I don't do all of them, but we have 2 ag appraisers. So I'm part of that ag appraisal team at Iowa Appraisal.
Ah, okay, good. And so, if you're doing a lot of the appraisals with this organization, I want to get to the importance of data later, because I think that's some commonality that you share and then we share at Tractor Zoom. And kind of the importance of data and what's important about it, like the cleanliness, the recency, and all that good stuff. But before we get into that, bigger picture, you started in 08. And then, we talked about moving up here, around 12?
Yep.
Okay. So you're hitting on all the big dates. I mean, and even getting started in the 80s. I mean, you're checking all the boxes in terms of the swings of the ag economy.
Yeah.
And so,
that's right.
I mean, if you look at a graph of the farmland values, you've got shooting up in the late 70s, right? And then a pretty stark crash down.
Yeah.
And people are familiar, even if they haven't lived through the 80s, they're familiar with what happened and how rough that was. Super high interest rates. But then even in 05 to 08, as you're getting into the business, the land values started to shoot up. Again, renewable fuel standards came out there. Ethanol was kind of a big thing. And then in 12, we had our drought. So corn prices shot up, led to land. And then that, for us in collecting data on used farm equipment, we're able to kind of track that and trend that and see those two together. And then here most recently with COVID, post-pandemic, had a shortage of equipment, but a spike in land and then equipment values. So from your experience on the land side, have you had any discussions or seen any correlations with how machinery has gone, especially in like '08 and 12, the times when you're appraising land?
Oh, absolutely. I think they move together. I think one of them might move faster than the other one, but they kind of move together. And that's one thing I'm always listening to you or Greg Peterson talking about what machinery prices are doing, because I know we're going to see that same trend in the land space.
Okay. So you're thinking that when machinery moves and then land kind of follows, is that kind of been your experience, or does it differ?
On this last run, it seemed like the machinery kind of took off first, but then the land, once it took off, it shot past it.
Right.
And then maybe kind of peaked a little sooner, and then kind of settled, and then kind of was stable. Whereas machinery just seemed to be strong. It just kept holding strong until here lately, where I'm finally starting to hear you guys say it's cooling off. Things are cooling off.
Right. And they certainly are. I mean, so if we're recording this, what do we like, one of the first few days of June right now.
Right.
And so May's kind of a quieter month for a lot of auctions anyway, so there's not a lot of data points in May that you can really hang your hat on. But even in March and April, we were certainly seeing some values that were coming in lower, certainly softer than what we saw even in January and February, and certainly softer than what we saw in the end of 23 in December. Those are probably the local highs that we've seen for machinery here lately. But land, so are you seeing land soften now?
Yeah, it's trending down. What I want to talk about my auction data.
Yeah.
I keep track of all the land auctions in Iowa. What I do every 3 weeks is I have 140 websites that I go through, and I download all those auction flyers. And so as those auctions occur in those 3 weeks, I'm keeping track of them.
You're going through those manually?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely. And I enter it in a spreadsheet. What I noticed in February, March, we had 17 no sales.
Okay.
And that is high. That is high. I knew the market was adjusting.
So for reference, 17 no sales in what, those 2 months?
Yes.
How many did we have in 21, 2, and 3?
You might go 3 months and not have any.
Okay.
It was every now and then a no sale would happen. And typically it was because the sellers had too high expectations, because they had heard all these big numbers and they thought their farm was at. Typically that's what it was. Yep. But when you have 17 no sales in 2 months, especially in the slower part of the season, I knew the market was adjusting. And the ones that did sell, they struggled to get sold. Now with past COVID, we can see a lot of those auctions online, watch them online. Right. And when they're struggling to get bids, that's telling you people, attitudes are changing,
Absolutely. Right.
So I knew the market was adjusting, and then we kind of got in April. I think there was only one no sale. So the market's kind of stabilized, and in May we had 2 no sales. And so I'd say the market has kind of stabilized, but in that time frame, like April or February, March, that corn market had just sunk down to like it got below $4. Right. And I think it shocked everybody.
I think I sell corn.
Yeah. And it just showed up in the market just all of a sudden, and then it's kind of gotten better now. But one thing about my data is when you have those amount of no sales, I throw that data out because I don't have a price to put in my spreadsheet.
Right.
So I'm measuring everything that's sold, and so my data won't pick up how much a market is adjusting because I throw those no sales out.
But it's still a significant thing that happened.
That's right. It needs to be talked about. If I put those whatever that last bid it was in that no sale and I plugged it in there, I would say we'd be close to 10% down.
Okay.
In the land market right now. But my data doesn't show that. It shows like 3 or 4% down.
And 10% probably over this time last year, or even over like November, December?
Over from the end of last year.
Okay. Yeah. And that's not too dissimilar from what I'm seeing. I just did a big analysis piece on self-propelled sprayers. Again, you want to kind of hit things when they're in high volume season, and they typically, March is a good time to gauge those. And I'm seeing that in that 10% down. It depends on the hours on those sprayers, because I think it's hitting different size of farmers differently. Ones that have different, investments and capital positions right now. So I'm not seeing 10% evenly across different hours of machines, but that 10% is a pretty good gauge on how far the market's moved on machinery just in the past 4 or 5 months.
Yeah. And one thing I do want to say is when I'd call those auctioneers when they had a no sale, they would tell me, they've got a reserve price, and then last bid, some of them were 10 to 20% off.
Whoa, off of the reserve?
Yes.
Wow.
So it's all based on location, but there's been some huge adjustments in areas.
Right.
But we've also seen some very strong sales. April 30th, Sioux County cranked out another $29,800 an acre.
I don't know what those farmers out west have that we don't in Northeast Iowa, but they do. They bring those record prices. And I'm sure, I was talking with one of our dealer partners out there about when they hit 30,000, that was the record price.
Yep.
He's like, it wasn't an investment banker. It was 2 farmers, and they both had livestock. Yep. So I think manure makes a big difference on some of those farms out there.
It does. It's huge. It's huge. And not very much comes up for sale. And those people have raised livestock and good crops for a long time, for generations. And when something comes up for sale, they fight with dollars.
Yes.
So that's why we see those, it's not unusual for one to go over $25,000 an acre there for crop ground. I'm not talking commercial development. So yeah. And, it seemed like last fall, the land market was kind of trading flat, and everybody was nervous about how good the crop was. And it seemed when everybody got out there and got to harvesting, it was like, this crop is better than what I thought it was going to be. And just talking to people, if they think they've got 50 bushel beans out there in the field, and they get out there with the combine and it's 70 bushel of beans per acre, that matters. And that affects land markets. So we kind of had a little bit of a run there in the fall, especially in Northwest Iowa. There was just a lot of strong prices coming out of there.
Yeah, and they hit the rains just right though too. I mean, I remember I was in Northwest Iowa, I was in Okoboji on the 4th of July, or right around there, and they got just a deluge coming, and it really helped set their corn through an important pollination period. And so I think they really had some great. I mean, I know they had good corn yields. My father-in-law farmed up there, and in his farm that he rents out now, I think they had record bean yields.
Yeah. So we had some really strong prices coming out of there last fall. But now, Sioux County keeps producing those big sales, but, when the market was really hot, we was getting $20,000 per acre sales every week. And now it's just every now and then. And it has to be probably in Northwest Iowa to get that big price. So that's kind of how the market's adjusted. When I do my auction research, I can tell you one thing that I notice now that hasn't been is the amount of listings that's on those websites is up. And so it's not unusual to see one that's had a price reduction, if not 2 price reductions to get it sold. Right. Okay, that wasn't in the market a year ago. And if it was listed, it was just sold full price or higher. You know?
Yep. Equipment the same way.
And so that's something that tells you the market's adjusting. And
well, I was going to mention before we get too far past it, because you said, you're searching through all the stuff, you're bringing this data in, and you're looking at individual farm sales, like from every single piece of paper and noting all that. And you talked about, October during harvest versus like November, December post harvest, and how those prices shot up there.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to talk about the quality of data and knowing all the intricacies of data, because before we started recording, we were talking about tile. And especially in Northern Iowa, how important that is, and to know the details on that. And I was seeing the same thing with farm equipment as well. that October we were hitting a little bit of a lull. I mean, it was a little bit softer, but even dealer auctions, very comparable dealer auctions in October did not do nearly as well as they did in November, December, because that sentiment had changed. And so that was a true movement of the market. Now, talking about the quality data post, the end of the year. So you move from December to January, which makes a big difference in the farm equipment side. That we're actually still seeing some, quote unquote, record sale prices of farm equipment. But then you get back to the devils in the details with the equipment. And some of these, self-propelled sprayers, even some combines, they were essentially tricked out. I mean, you had leather seats, premium cab packages. There's a few farmers that had residual cash that knew what they wanted, and they were going to get what they wanted. There probably was 2 farmers that had that.
Right.
And so while we actually had some record prices for sprayers in the month of January, it wasn't a true move of the market as much as it was just kind of an outlier, a nuance of just a few residual people that are bidding a super high price for what they wanted. And after that kind of washed out of the system, and that demand was satisfied, then I think we started to really show what this market's, where this market's currently at.
Right. There was so much cash plugged in the system through that COVID period that some people still have cash. And so we see it still shows up in the market. So we get some really strong prices every now and then.
Right.
But the overall trend is lower. It's lower.
So then let's talk about that cash in the market. Because, like we said, farmers still have cash. Like 24, even if the crop year, like once harvest hits and with the eventual commodity prices, it's not going to be great. But farmers are still making payments on their debt for the most part, and they're in a decent cash position than they've been in a long time in terms of like cash to debt ratios. But after 12 into 13, 14, and then kind of the long trough of the farm, what was your experience in terms of how many years did it take after, the good times before you started to really see, prices of land come down? And was it 6 months? Was it a year? Was it 2 years before it really started to hurt and hit?
I'm appraising some land for an estate right now, and I had to go back to 2016, and those prices were adjusted down. They were down by 2016. So here's the way I look at it. We had the last run up was in the 2012, 2013 range. And at that time, the 2 highest prices I knew of, it was in Sioux County, and there's 2 farms that sold over $20,000 an acre, and that was around 2013. And at that time, that was just blowed everybody away.
Right.
And it seemed like in about a year, the market cooled off 20 to 25%.
Okay.
And then it stayed flat from I would say around late 2015, 2016. It stayed flat up until October of 2020. And then 2020, it was in October, and that's when COVID was hitting, and I thought the market was just going to crash when COVID hit. And it was kind of holding its own. But in October, I really started noticing those auctions that were coming in. Man, this market's changing. This market's changing, and it just kept going. And then, so I would say it was from 2015 to late 2020 is how long that market was just flat, and just stayed flat.
So we're going to have to get our data scientist, Hank, with you to correlate these things, because I was tracking the markets. I started really looking at them in 2019, and rough year, 2020, rough year. And it was, for me, I noticed it in November of 2020, because I remember I wrote a blog post on it. And what happened, at least, again, this is where we need to bring Hank in to figure out, not correlation, but causation. So Trump was president. Then we had the trade war with China going on, and so they stopped buying a lot of our goods. And then there was an influx of a little bit of cash, if I remember right, that we weren't really expecting. The farmers got certain payments. I can't even remember the acronym, like 3-letter acronym of payments that you got to help compensate for that trade war. And so there's a little bit more cash in the pocket. And the growing year, I believe, was decent. And so it was that surprise, beat expectations at the end of the year of, I have more money than I thought I would.
Yeah.
And
Right.
then that started to peak. For me, I was watching the equipment prices. And so I started to see those start to rise in November, and then obviously definitely in end of year in December to offset some taxes that they totally didn't expect. And then you had 21 hit, and then just blew the top off.
Yeah. You talk about keeping track of a market on a day-to-day basis, or the how current is your data.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't keep track of those auctions every day like I was doing, nobody would have believed the market was moving as fast as it was, because it was moving so fast that, to me, the only way to figure out where the top or the market was at is having an auction.
Mm-hmm.
Because
right.
I was talking to realtors, and they said, I had this farm listed and I got a full price offer, and then got another call. Well, I'll pay this much more than next thing you know, they had a bidding war.
Right.
And it was just all the time like that. And so, and then they would say, we just got to go to auction with most everything. Mm-hmm. And it was just unbelievable how fast that market moved. It went up on an elevator, and it seems to be kind of coming stair-stepping itself down, but it was explosive. I just don't know if there's ever a time where we've seen a market move that fast. Up.
Right. I know. It's that sense of scarcity. There's a lot of behavioral economics research that's done on it, but as soon as people feel that sense of scarcity of there's very limited time or money or both, we have to act. And it really drives, whether it's rational or irrational, it drives that behavior. And I think that was a big reason why the market just started to shoot up.
Yeah. And people were coming out of the woodwork to buy land. It was just people from the East Coast or West Coast. It was just amazing who all was showing up wanting to buy dirt.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. So then, there's a lot of different directions that we could go, and but to kind of put a cap on the transparency and the quality of data that you bring in. So you're talking about auctions. Auctions really help tell the movement of the market.
That's right. Being from Missouri, we didn't have an active auction market. And so when I moved to Iowa, they had an active auction market. And I thought, man, this is a blessing nobody knows about here. So as social media come around, I learned about Twitter. And so I had to have a Twitter handle, and I decided it would be the Land Talker. And so I started posting those results of those auctions, and just people loved it. They want that current information. They want accurate information. Mm-hmm. And that's the marketplace demands current, accurate information, both land and machinery.
Hey everybody, Andy here. I want to take a moment to ask you to subscribe and follow this podcast just so you don't miss out on all the latest updates and insights for your dealership. Now, let's get back to this conversation. And so at the Land Talker, correct?
Yeah,
that's
on
your
Twitter. Yeah.
Okay, so anybody that's watching this, you can follow Jim there. And but on the auction, with what we see in the machinery market, because there are some people that are skeptics saying, I don't follow the auction market because that's not what I'm going to sell it at. And that might actually be true, because I would hope that people are retailing this equipment for much more than what it is bringing at auction. But the auction is at least two people, likely a lot more, that are giving their true sentiment with what matters most. It's their pocketbook. And they have to put their livelihood on the line. So they're doing as much research as they can, probably a little bit of emotion, but that plays into price. And so for what we see in the equipment market it's probably one of the most leading indicators of market direction that's happening. And it might not be the price that people actually get out of it. It might be their liquidation price if they have to. But it is truly one of the most leading indicators that we've seen out there, because as soon as that corn market changes, like we mentioned, back in February when it dropped to $4, it's way below cost right now, then you're making a new decision or just holding back and not making a decision.
It shows up pretty quick in the market. And if we have a rally in corn, I'd say it'd show up pretty quick too. So those are definite market influencers, and you got to have current data. And one thing I always tell people, transparency is good for a market. And me and you provide transparency. Right. You do it in the machinery, I do it in the land market. Markets are more efficient if there's more transparency. And so Iowa has got that with the land auction market because they have a good flow of auctions here. But one thing I'll tell you that is an issue, and we won't get into it very far, but cash rent auctions are very few and far between, and that's some data people are just, demand that there's just not a lot of. So
right.
So that's an area that needs some more transparency.
Yeah, that's good perspective. I don't know if there's an analogy in the equipment market, potentially lease or a rent. I'm not sure. I'd have to do a little more talk on that. But on the transparency piece, and I shouldn't even bring it up because I can't remember the guy's name, but I'm pretty sure it was a 1979 economics Nobel Prize winner, wrote a paper on peaches versus lemons. And he's talking about cars. You might buy a lemon and get stuck with it. But his idea is if the dealer and the buyer both have completely transparent information, then they're much more likely to come to a deal and make that transaction happen at a mutually, obviously agreed upon price, but at a more advantageous price over the long term because more deals happen. And it's exactly that same thing of transparency breeds actually better commerce and more deals done, which on the dealer space, it's all about turns. So you can make a little bit more off of margins one way or another maybe, but it's truly about turns, and so therefore transparency is key. Yeah.
And with the way technology is now, we can get it out there, but 10 years ago, it wasn't there. But for either one of us.
Right. But now it is. So
it is now, so people need to take advantage of that. Absolutely.
Good. So, well, I don't want to cut you off. You have one more thing to say? Because I want to talk about future.
I'll just say one thing about cash rents. I do collect cash rent auctions, and I was surprised how strong some of those come in this spring. And I just heard of another farm renting in northern Iowa for over $500 an acre. So there's a time lag. I mean, it seems like land prices will go down, and it takes maybe a year or two for cash rents to follow. But I just have been amazed by how strong some of those have been this spring.
Wow. Yeah. Maybe that gets back to scarcity, or maybe lack of transparent information. I don't know, but that's a lot to pay for an acre of land.
That's what I thought, with corn the way it is. It's below cost of production. But
right. Okay. So if that's now, let's talk, the podcast is labeled Beyond the Hood. So let's look beyond the hood. Let's talk about the future. Do you have any inklings on what land might do in, 24, 25, 26, or influences that might shift it one way or another?
Well, that's your best investment you have is that farmland that you talked about that you bought. That's your best investment. Right. It's going to be and for your kids to
yes, my wife will say yes, our kids, not us, probably.
Yeah. So, I look at all these people that aren't farmers that are wanting to get in the land space. They've done their homework and they see a bright future for land. And they're buying land. I mean, they're not as aggressive as farmers, but by God, they throw a floor underneath at those auctions, and they're willing to pay so much. And they want to get in this space, so they've done their homework. I think it's a bright future. I think in the long term it is. In the short term, I think we've got to adjust to what corn prices are today. I think in the short term, the next 1 to 3 years, it's probably going to trend down. I think it's just going to be like a slow leak, nothing rapid like it went up. It's just going to cool off and probably flatten out until we have something that black swan event like COVID or something like that really increases corn demand and what have you. So net farm income has to be higher than it is now for it to go higher. So we're not there, but it's still a good investment. I think there's some buying opportunities right now if you do your research and follow these auctions and know what these farms are selling for. I think there's some opportunities out here for buying opportunities. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Oh, good. Well, I hope there are buying opportunities. One of my really good friends is potentially going to buy one of his first pieces of ground on Thursday. So the auction's on Thursday. It's running right now, but it'll close with live auction on Thursday. So my fingers crossed for him that you're right.
Yeah.
So then, I've got some positives on the land side, some bright spots, but I also have some reservations on, the future. I barely bring these up with my dad because he's always like, land is always a good investment. Like, don't question it. Don't even bring it up. It's like religion. Just don't talk about it. Brazil. I mean, they're putting more land into production year after year, and they're getting better at what they do, right? Now, it's not great land. I mean, if they didn't have fertilizer, that stuff would die, so soon. But a lot more land in production. I mean, they're putting a state of land into production every single year. Will they just, is there a chance that they just beat us out and our land is worth less because they have so much more?
Oh, there's a possibility of it, but to me, we're innovators here in the United States. As technology gets better, the cost of production for each bushel goes down, and that cost is collapsing, much like technology is. So I don't know if they can compete with us as technology gets better.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. I mean, especially, I'm in the tech space, Tractor Zoom's in the tech space, but I know a lot of our dealers, we talk to them, and that's what they're talking about. They're talking about data and connectedness of the farms. I know that sometimes there's tech that comes out there on the machinery side that can be questionable, but there's some other times where that ROI it's quickly known. I think See and Spray or the similar vision technologies are potentially going to lower costs quite a bit. But I also know labor is a huge issue.
That's the big
just
deal.
because the demographics are growing. And my dad even talks about, his ability to ride in a tractor is not what it used to be. But he said the one technology that's given him almost an extra 10 years is just simply the guidance systems, the auto steer. He said he can ride in a tractor now all day and not ache at night.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard people say that.
Yeah, and so I don't know if that was the initial idea, but that really solved the problem and increased a generation's ability to be in a tractor, to continue to do what they do. So that's good perspective, because that's a piece of innovation that can continue to make us better.
Yeah, the seed companies will tell you that they can get better bushel and a half a year for corn. Mm-hmm. And then as far as the technology you're talking about with different things, can they get 2.5 bushels every year, better yields? It could be.
Right.
Go higher. So I just don't see anybody beating us on innovation. I really don't.
No, that's good. And I mean, obviously I own land, and then I hope that continues to be the case there.
Yeah. And I look how much land's getting taken out of production for, the growth of West Des Moines and Des Moines and the wind turbines and the solar panels. Those solar panels are taking a lot of land out of production.
They are.
So,
right.
One phone call I get fairly regularly is somebody's been hit up with getting solar panels on their farm, and I've heard payments as high as $2,500 an acre rent per year. And they're like, "What's my farm going to be worth at the end of that term?" And I'm like, "I have no idea.
Right. There's no precedence for that. Yeah.
I don't know."
Right.
Can it raise corn at the end of a 50-year term, whatever that term is?
Right. Does it ruin it? Does it not? Yeah.
I don't know.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's taking a lot of land, good land out of production. So those are things that put so much scarcity for good cropland. It's just makes what we're out here farming worth more as they do more of that green energy stuff.
Yeah. I know that's something that we talk about quite a bit on our farm, whether it's solar or trying to qualify for the renewable fuel standards, the 3 different pieces that they go in with a potentially higher corn price, and that's not all even ironed out yet. But that could, if it truly goes through, that could significantly change the way that people farm, and then the equipment that they need to be able to do that. Whether it's cover crop, no-till, manure management, or what have you.
Let me ask you this. Is that some of this equipment so big, I just can't believe how big it is. Are we getting a limit on how big equipment is?
We have to be. And I've heard on the cotton picker side that Deere has made their largest cotton picker. And so they only see it either staying at that same size, or they plan on regressing the size, making it more efficient and better, but not bigger. I would have assumed that the same thing was going to happen with tractors. And then until this last year at Commodity Classic, they come out with 3 even bigger ones. I mean, at some point, your weight load going across county bridges.
Right.
And then with the roads, that's going to stop.
And then why would you want that big a machine out in your field packing, compacting?
Exactly, and I think that's why they have to be quad tracks and stuff to help distribute the weight.
Right.
Obviously, it gives you stronger horse and pulling power if you have more weight. But at a point, I mean, unless our field structure changes here in the Midwest and you move towards more like Brazil, where you have wide open fields, then it can get bigger because you just are going to pull massive amounts of implements. Cut down the labor issue a little bit because you're pulling an extra 50 to 100 feet wide and covering more ground. But yeah, from I would have told you a couple of years ago I thought it capped, but I know reading old articles of, when they had class 5 and class 6 combines and then they went 7, it's like, whew, this got to be the top. And we look back at that and nowhere near the top. So I don't know. I mean, looking back that it was tough to predict then. I think it's probably tough to predict now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know one thing, the technology is out of this world on those new machines. It's unbelievable what they have.
Yeah. Yeah. So then kind of wrapping up the future talk and then putting a bow on the whole conversation here. From your perspective, do you have advice for dealers? Because dealers obviously are not, they're not buying and selling land necessarily unless it's part of their operation, but it's their farmers that are, right? So their farmers, it's share their checkbook that they have to share then with the dealership on whether it's buying equipment or just servicing the equipment that they have. But it's all tied together because if you're growing in your operation in land, you're going to be growing in machinery. And so, yeah, from your perspective on things that you've seen and looking forward to the next foreseeable future, do you have any advice for dealers who are trying to sell equipment but also trying to, continue and establish new relationships with farmers and continue to sell them parts, service? Any guidance and advice for them?
I think technology is going to win the day, and I think absentee landowners is going to continue to grow because one guy can't own the farmland and own all that farm machinery too. So I think just, building those relationships, and as farmers retire, the existing young farmers we have now are going to get a lot bigger, and just keep them guys on top of all the innovation that's coming because they're going to need it. And like I said, labor is going to be an issue. It is an issue.
Right.
And it's not going to get better. Mm-hmm. And so I can see the tractors that drive themselves being the future, and trying to get those labor requirements down as low as possible. So that's kind of the way I see it, is the next generation farmers going to have limited labor supply, and he's going to have to use this technology to do what he needs to do.
So, Jim, we talked a lot about what's happened in the land market and what's currently going on with the land and equipment, and even a little bit forward-looking. So, to put a whole bow on this, we know that equipment and land have been tied together. Yep. And obviously, they share the checkbook. People need to keep up on the land just as much as they keep up on the machinery. How can they keep up on what's going on in the land market?
Sure. Well, as I said, I keep track of all the land auctions in Iowa. And so as those results come in, I post them, most of them on Twitter. I don't know if I get all of them on Twitter. And my Twitter handle is @TheLandTalker. And you can follow me on Twitter. I also do posts on Facebook and LinkedIn of those auction results. I also have a weekly blog that has these results in a week posted on Twitter. And then my most popular item that I have is my monthly Land Talk newsletter that has the auction results of a month. And I also have narrative in that that has stuff I've picked up with conversations with the auctioneers. And I try not to put my opinion in it. It's just what they're telling me. So that's what the narrative is. This is what I'm hearing out in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. So that's very popular, and it goes out once a month via email. It's a free subscription. And all you have to do is email me that you'd like to be added to that subscription. And my email is thelandtalker@iowaappraisal.com.
Oh, good. Well, I sign up for you on Twitter. I follow you on Twitter. It's probably the most productive thing that I do on Twitter, because otherwise it's a horrible rabbit hole. But I do not receive the newsletter yet. So I'll make sure that I give you a follow on the newsletter and look forward to getting that every month.
Yep. No, that'd be great. It's free subscription, so you can't beat the price.
Fantastic. Well, Jim, thank you for joining us on Beyond the Hood with Tractor Zoom, and thank you for all of our guests for joining us here in this discussion, tying land and equipment values together and where they might go. If you haven't yet followed us on every podcasting channel or YouTube, make sure you take the time to do that so you don't miss the next updates. And again, this is Andy Campbell with Beyond the Hood with Tractor Zoom. Take care.